right now, as you were listening to this, your brain is quietly trying to juggle roughly 70,000 individual thoughts.
Which is, I mean, that's just a staggering amount of processing power.
It really is. And, unlike a computer, you can't just run out to the store and buy more RAM.
Right. You're just stuck with what you have.
Exactly. So welcome to today's deep dive. I want you to think about it this way. If you told a friend that you hadn't brushed your teeth or taken a shower in a month, they would probably back away from you slowly.
Oh, absolutely. They'd be horrified.
Right. Because we have these deeply ingrained, socially mandated daily habits for our physical hygiene. But when it comes to our minds, we routinely let weeks, or honestly sometimes months, of psychological plaque just build up.
Yeah, it's so true. We're talking about unmanaged stress, lingering anxieties, and just the sheer crushing weight of all those daily thoughts.
We just let it accumulate until the system crashes.
It is a massive blind spot for most of us. We treat physical maintenance as a baseline requirement for being a functioning human being, but mental maintenance is somehow treated as an optional luxury.
Or like a spa day or something.
Exactly. Or worse, it's something we only ever address when we're in the middle of a 5-alarm crisis. We just don't do preventative care on our own minds.
And that changes today because we are building a personalized, highly actionable, science-backed toolkit for what we are calling mental hygiene.
I love that term.
Me too. And to do this, we have pulled together a really fascinating stack of sources for you. We're looking at neurobiology research from the Huberman Lab and Aura Ring data. We are digging into psychological studies on something called cognitive offloading.
Which is fascinating, by the way.
Oh, completely. And we've also got clinical guides on somatic therapy and even some cutting-edge medical analysis on how artificial intelligence is fundamentally altering the way human beings cope with stress.
It's such a brilliant collection to pull from because it spans the entire spectrum of the human experience. From the ancient hardwired biology of our nervous system all the way to modern digital dilemmas.
Yeah, it covers all the bases.
But to actually start cleaning out that mental plaque you just mentioned, the very first step is aggressively simple. We have to empty the trash.
Okay, let's unpack this. Emptying the trash sounds great in theory, but when my brain feels like a browser with 100 tabs open and music is playing from one of them and I don't know which one.
The worst feeling.
It's awful. How do I actually force the system to clear?
You have to utilize a psychological mechanism called cognitive offloading. It's the physical act of transferring information from your biological brain to an external source to forcefully reduce your mental demand.
Okay, so getting it out of my head.
Right, because the working memory of your brain is incredibly fragile. It can really only hold a handful of items at any given moment before it starts to, drop things. When you try to hold on to a task, say, remembering to email your accountant, your brain is actively burning metabolic energy to keep that thought alive.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But when you write it down on a piece of paper, your brain recognizes that the information is safe in the physical world, and it literally stops spending energy trying to hold on to it.
So it's not just a metaphor. I am mechanically changing how my brain allocates its power supply.
Precisely. And the clinical data on this is just staggering. There was a team of researchers led by Scullin at Baylor University, and they looked at people struggling with insomnia.
Yep.
You know that feeling when you're staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., you're exhausted, but your brain is just running a marathon of everything you have to do the next day?
I know that exact feeling intimately. It's the worst.
Right. So they had participants in a sleep lab take just 5 minutes before getting into bed to write out a specific to-do list for the next day. That is it. Just 5 minutes of offloading.
These are the basic list.
It's just a basic list. And those participants fell asleep a full 9 minutes faster than the control group who didn't write anything down.
Wait, really? 9 minutes of extra high-quality sleep just from scratching out a quick list on a notepad?
Yep.
That feels like a suspiciously easy life hack.
Well, the mechanism is what makes it work. You are literally closing the open loops in your brain software so the hardware can power down.
That makes a lot of sense.
And it applies to high-stakes environments, too. A study published in the journal Science by Ramirez and Bylock looked at students facing a massive high-pressure exam.
Okay.
They had these students do a 10-minute worry dump right before the test. The students just grabbed a blank piece of paper and wrote down every single fear, insecurity, and anxiety they had about failing.
Seriously. I would think that focusing on your anxieties right before a test would just make you spiral and perform worse.
That is the logical assumption, absolutely. But the opposite happened. Those students improved their test scores by nearly a full grade point compared to those who didn't write anything.
A full letter grade. How is that even possible?
Because unexpressed anxiety acts like a parasite on your working memory.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If you are sitting in an exam, part of your brain is trying to solve the math problem, but a massive chunk of your cognitive bandwidth is secretly being used to manage the background panic of, well, what if I fail?
Right, it's running in the background.
Exactly. Getting the panic onto the paper physically removed it from their working memory. It freed up their mental bandwidth for actual problem solving.
Okay, so if the goal is just getting it out of my head, do I just sit down and vomit my thoughts onto a page, or is there a structure to this? Because honestly, sometimes the blank page is intimidating.
Well, the sources outline a few specific methods, and you can choose the one that fits the specific type of overwhelm you're feeling.
Okay, what are they?
If you're just emotionally tangled, use the free write. You just set a timer for 5 minutes and write continuously without stopping, without editing, or even caring about grammar.
Just a pure brain drain.
Exactly. Now, if you are overwhelmed by logistics, do a category dump where you literally divide a page into work, personal, and health and categorize the chaos.
Oh, I like that. I'm a list person.
Me too. There's also a mind map for visual thinkers. And if you're spiraling, do the worry dump we just mentioned, where you write out your specific anxieties and then force yourself to rate them on a scale of 1 to 10.
Why rate them?
Because it forces the logical part of your brain to evaluate the emotional part.
Oh, that's clever. But hang on, if getting things out of my head and into an external source works so well, I have a massive shortcut here.
Oh boy. I think I know where this is going.
Why wouldn't I just use all these new AI journaling apps and smart wearable mood trackers? I mean, if the goal is to offload the cognitive burden, shouldn't I offload it to a supercomputer that can track my habits, analyze my voice for stress, and tell me exactly how I'm doing?
That is the million-dollar question right now. And it leads us into incredibly tricky territory.
Why is that?
Because you are shifting the focus from the act of offloading to the tools we are using to do it. And heavily relying on artificial intelligence for mental hygiene is a massive double-edged sword.
Okay, color me intrigued.
We looked at a fascinating medical research paper from the PMC on how AI fundamentally alters our coping architecture, and they draw a razor-sharp distinction between cognitive offloading and what they call cognitive overload.
So the tool I buy to reduce my stress could actually be the thing causing it.
Easily. The great danger here is outsourcing your own resilience.
What do you mean by that?
Let's say you're wearing a biometric smart device. It's constantly tracking your heart rate variability and skin temperature, and it sends you a push notification at 2 p.m. saying, your stress index is currently at 85%.
Okay.
Or maybe an AI mood tracker analyzes your journal entry and categorizes you as highly anxious. What the technology is doing is flattening the vast, incredibly complex nuance of human emotion into a sterile, definitive number.
Right, because if I'm about to step on a stage to give a keynote presentation, my heart rate is going to be 120 beats per minute.
Exactly.
I'm not having a panic attack, I'm pumped, I'm excited. Is the algorithm actually smart enough to know the difference between excitement and terror?
No, it often isn't. And that is the trap. If you start implicitly trusting that algorithmic output over your own internal introspection, you begin to lose touch with your own body.
That's scary.
It is. You stop checking in with yourself and asking, how do I actually feel right now? Instead, you look down at your wrist and ask the screen, how am I feeling?
Wow.
This creates a psychological phenomenon known as hypermonitoring. The constant tracking itself becomes a massive source of anxiety. You start chasing a perfect sleep score or a flawless calm score.
Which is incredibly ironic. You were getting stressed out about failing at relaxation.
Precisely. But, the research doesn't say you should throw your devices in the trash. It highlights a critical difference between using technology for scaffolding versus using it for substitution.
Scaffolding, like on a building.
Yeah, exactly. Scaffolding means using an app, like a conversational chatbot that prompts you to reflect, or maybe an app like LifeNote that teaches you a new breathing technique as temporary training wheels.
Okay, so they help you build the habit.
Right. They provide structure while you build internal skills. But the implicit goal of scaffolding is always to eventually ride the bike on your own.
Let me guess. Substitution is when you weld the training wheels to the bike and never take them off.
Exactly. Substitution is relying on the machine to such an extreme degree that your own psychological immunity begins to atrophy.
That makes total sense.
You literally need the app to remind you to take a deep breath. You need the AI to reframe a negative thought for you because you've forgotten how to challenge your own thinking.
Wow.
What's fascinating here is how this ties directly into a psychological framework called self-determination theory, which states that human beings require autonomy to be mentally healthy. AI is only helpful if it preserves your autonomy and competence. The second it starts doing the coping for you, it becomes detrimental.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. We've talked about thinking our way out of stress with a notebook and the brain dump. And we've established that we can't fully outsource our resilience to an app.
Right?
But what happens when the stress is already past the point of rational thought? What do you do when that stress is physically trapped in your body?
Ah, yes.
That brings us to somatic therapy. This moves us entirely away from a top-down mental approach, where we're trying to think our way into calmness, and introduces a bottom-up physical approach. I like to think of it like a car alarm going off in the middle of the night.
Oh, that is a great way to visualize it.
Right, because if your car alarm is blaring, you can't just stand in your driveway and yell at the car to stop making noise.
No, it doesn't care.
The car doesn't speak English.
Yeah.
And that is essentially what traditional talk therapy or overthinking is sometimes doing. You're yelling at a blaring nervous system. To actually stop the alarm, you have to physically press the button on the key fob to reset the system.
Exactly.
That's what somatic movement does for your body.
It is a perfect analogy because the body literally does not speak the language of logic when it is under threat. The clinical guides we reviewed from resilience counseling and somatic therapy partners make this very clear. Chronic stress doesn't just live in our abstract thoughts. It is stored in our physical tissue.
Really? Like physically stored?
Yes. It manifests as a constantly clenched jaw, shoulders creeping up to your ears, shallow breathing, or unexplained chronic fatigue.
So my body is essentially hoarding the stress I couldn't process mentally.
Yes, exactly. When you perceive a threat, even if it is just a rude email from a client, your body enters fight or flight survival mode. When that happens, the rational, logical part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, essentially goes offline.
It just shuts down.
It is biologically suppressed. So trying to rationalize with yourself by saying, oh, it's just an email, calm down, is completely useless. You have to send physical safety signals from the body back up to the brain.
And this source is called these somatic shorts, these quick 5-minute physical exercises you can do anywhere to press that key fob and reset the alarm.
Yes, they are incredibly practical.
One of them that immediately caught my eye is called the butterfly hug. It sounds, I don't know, a little overly precious, but the mechanics behind it are fascinating.
The mechanics are what matter. For the butterfly hug, you cross your arms over your chest so your hands are resting on your opposite shoulders, right below your collarbone.
Okay.
Then you gently and rhythmically tap each hand alternately, left, right, while breathing deeply.
I mean, it almost looks like you're physically comforting yourself. Does just patting your shoulders really do anything at a neurological level?
It absolutely does. This technique is widely used in trauma therapy because of a concept called bilateral stimulation.
Bilateral stimulation.
Right. By tapping the left and right sides of your body alternately, you are forcing the left and right hemispheres of your brain to communicate and synchronize.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, when someone is spiraling in anxiety, their brain activity is highly chaotic and often localized to the emotional centers. The rhythmic bilateral tapping physically forces the nervous system to regulate itself, and it anchors your sensory perception in the present physical room, pulling you out of the abstract panic in your mind.
Another one mentioned is shaking it out, just standing up and vigorously shaking your hands, arms, legs, and torso for a solid minute or two.
Which is a deeply evolutionary biological response. Think about watching a nature documentary.
Okay.
If a gazelle is chased by a cheetah and manages to escape, what is the very first thing it does once it reaches safety?
It shakes.
Yes, it stands there, and its entire body violently shakes and trembles. It is instinctively discharging the massive, toxic flood of adrenaline and cortisol that just kept it alive.
But as modern humans, we don't do that. We experience a threat, like our boss yells at us in a Zoom meeting, and our body floods with the exact same survival chemicals as the gazelle. But social norms dictate that we just sit there frozen at our desks, smiling at the webcam.
Exactly. We swallow the chemical cocktail. Deliberately shaking, your body mimics that biological release. It metabolizes the stress hormones and signals to the brain that the threat has passed.
There's also pendulation, right?
Yes, pendulation is a great one. That's where you deliberately shift your focus back and forth between a part of your body that feels tight or uncomfortable and a part that feels neutral or pleasant. It teaches your nervous system that you aren't completely consumed by the stress.
I really like that one. And then there is VU sounding, which I have to admit I was incredibly skeptical of at first. You take a deep breath into your belly and exhale with a long, low VU sound, almost like a ship's foghorn.
It's definitely unique.
It feels completely ridiculous to do.
It does feel silly until you look at the anatomy of the vagus nerve.
Okay, lay it on me.
The vagus nerve is the primary superhighway connecting your brain to your internal organs. Your heart, your lungs, your digestive tract. It regulates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest state.
Right, the brake pedal.
Exactly. And the vagus nerve runs right down through your vocal cords. So when you make that deep, low-pitch acoustic vibration in your throat, you are physically massaging that nerve. You are mechanically stimulating it to flip the switch out of fight or flight.
Okay, I love the mechanics of that. But let's be realistic for a second. Somatic exercises like shaking violently or making loud foghorn noises are amazing if I'm alone in my living room.
Fair point.
But if I'm sitting in the middle of a high-stakes board meeting or I'm strapped into a middle seat on a turbulent flight, I need an invisible tool. I can't exactly start VU sounding while the CEO is reviewing quarterly earnings.
No, you definitely cannot. And that is the perfect transition to the ultimate invisible bridge between the conscious and subconscious mind, your breath.
Okay.
The breath is the single fastest, most accessible physiological reset button the human body possesses.
We pulled heavily from the Huberman Lab and Oura Ring data to understand this. And when you realize how much manual control you actually have over your own automatic biology, it feels like a superpower.
It really does. It is entirely based on a biological mechanism called respiratory sinus arrhythmia.
That sounds like a terrifying medical condition.
I know, but it is actually a hardwired structural feature of your body. It works mechanically like this. When you inhale, your diaphragm physically moves down to pull air in. This creates more physical space inside your chest cavity.
Okay.
Because there is more space, your heart physically expands slightly.
Wait, my heart gets a little bigger.
Just a little bit. And because the heart is larger, the blood moving through it slows down. Your brain constantly monitors this blood flow. It notices the drop in speed, and it immediately fires an electrical signal to the heart saying, speed up.
Let me be sure I'm getting this. The mechanical act of inhaling always equals a faster heart rate.
Always. And the exact opposite is true for exhaling. When you exhale, the diaphragm moves up, the space in your chest cavity shrinks, the heart is compressed and becomes smaller, the blood flows through it faster, and the brain sends a signal to apply the brakes.
Wow.
Exhales always equal a slower heart rate.
It's literally like having a manual override switch for an autopilot system. So if I am stressed and my heart is racing, the most powerful application of this override is a specific technique called the physiological sigh.
Yes. Clinical trials show the physiological sigh is arguably the fastest way to calm the human nervous system in real time.
How do you do it?
It consists of 2 inhales through the nose, followed by 1 long, extended exhale through the mouth.
2 inhale.
Yeah, the first inhale brings in oxygen, but it is that second quick, sharp inhale on top of the first one that is the magic key.
What does that second one do?
Well, deep inside your lungs are millions of tiny balloon-like air sacs called alveoli. When we get stressed, our breathing naturally becomes shallow and those little sacs deflate and collapse.
So that second sharp inhale acts like a pump to forcefully pop those collapsed alveoli back open.
Exactly. It maximizes the surface area of your lungs. And then that long, slow exhale through the mouth offloads a massive, disproportionate amount of carbon dioxide from the bloodstream.
And CO2 is the bad guy here, right?
Right. High CO2 levels are what trigger the feeling of agitation and panic in the brain. By dumping the CO2 and utilizing a long exhale, you instantly activate the parasympathetic nervous system. It is literally an emergency pressure release valve for stress.
And what blows my mind is that the data shows doing the physiological sigh for just 30 seconds to maybe 5 minutes dramatically reduces overall stress. It even improves mood more effectively than standard mindfulness meditation.
Because it is purely mechanical, you don't have to believe in it for it to work.
But the data also offers a pretty serious warning, because if you can use your breath as a pressure release valve to calm down, you can also use it to massively ramp up your nervous system. The sources warn about something called cyclic hyperventilation.
Right. If the long exhale slows you down, forcefully taking deep, rapid inhales repeatedly will massively accelerate you.
Like hyping yourself up.
Exactly. Cyclic hyperventilation deliberately floods the brain and body with adrenaline. It is highly effective if you are lethargic and need to quickly increase your alertness before a heavy workout or a major presentation.
But what's the catch?
Because you are rapidly altering your oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, it can easily make you lightheaded or dizzy. The strict clinical warning is that you must never, ever do cyclic hyperventilation near a body of water or while driving a vehicle. The risk of passing out is real.
Okay, definitely noting that way. So let's zoom out for a second. We have covered emptying the trash with a brain dump, avoiding the trap of outsourcing our resilience to AI, manually resetting the body with somatic movement, and pulling the emergency release valve with our breath.
That's a solid toolkit.
It is. But true dental hygiene isn't just about having great emergency tools, right? It is about daily preventative maintenance. How do you build a daily routine to keep the plaque away without the routine itself becoming just another stressful, rigid item on your to-do list?
The secret is abandoning the idea that you need to micromanage every single minute of your day. You don't need a color-coded calendar that makes you feel guilty if you miss a 15-minute block.
Oh, thank goodness.
You simply need to aggressively protect the start and the end of your day. You anchor your life by creating strong biological bookends.
Let's start with the morning bookend. The neuroscience points to one absolute non-negotiable habit: morning sunlight.
Yes.
The data from Think Happy, Live Healthy in the Huberman Lab is unbelievably clear on this.
Yeah.
You need 5 to 10 minutes of natural sunlight in your eyes within 30 to 60 minutes of waking up.
It is arguably the single most impactful thing you can do for your mental health. When natural sunlight hits the neurons in your retina early in the day, it sends a direct electrical signal to your brain's master clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus.
And what does that do?
It perfectly calibrates your circadian rhythm. It triggers a healthy, necessary spike of cortisol to wake you up, and it immediately boosts your levels of serotonin and dopamine, which dictate your mood and motivation for the rest of the day.
Now, I know a lot of people are thinking, well, I sit by a bright window in my kitchen while I drink my coffee. Isn't that the same thing?
It is not even close. Indoor artificial light, or even light filtered through a modern window pane, is 50 to 100 times weaker in photon energy than direct sunlight.
100 times.
Yes. Even on a completely overcast, cloudy day, the light outside is vastly superior to the brightest lights in your house. You have to physically step outside.
It's a huge distinction.
And here's the truly fascinating part. That morning sunlight essentially starts a 15-hour biological countdown timer.
Really?
Yeah. By properly anchoring your morning with sunlight, you are creating the exact neurochemical feedback loop that will dictate when your pineal gland releases melatonin later that night. Getting sun at 7 a.m. is the biological prerequisite for falling asleep deeply at 10 p.m.
Which exposes a huge flaw in how most of us live, and it perfectly brings us to the evening bookend. If morning sunlight starts a 15-hour timer for melatonin, what happens if I am staring at a bright iPad screen at hour 14? Does that just nuke the whole process?
Yes, it essentially tricks your brain into thinking the sun has risen again, completely halting melatonin production.
That's terrible.
That is why the Ahead app blog emphasizes the concept of a digital sunset.
A digital sunset. I like that.
It's a deliberate period, ideally 1 to 2 hours before bed, where you completely disconnect from all screens. It creates a psychological and physiological buffer zone, getting your brain permission to shift gears and decompress from the constant low-level threat of emails and notifications.
But let's be honest, relying on pure willpower to not look at your phone at 10 p.m. is a losing battle. The best way to actually stick to a digital sunset is environmental design.
100%.
Think about your nightstand right now. If your phone is sitting right there next to your pillow, the temptation to doom scroll is going to win. You have to set up a charging station outside of your bedroom. Remove the temptation entirely.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. And instead of scrolling, use that time in bed for the 4-7-8 breathing method. Inhaling for 4 seconds, holding the breath for 7 seconds, and exhaling for 8 seconds. That long 8-second exhale chemically winds your heart rate down.
It is all about designing an environment that makes the healthy choice the easiest possible choice.
So what does this all mean for you? If we step back and look at the entire toolkit we've assembled today, it is incredibly empowering.
It really is.
You don't need a perfect, rigid schedule. You just need small, consistent bookends to your day. You start by dumping the mental clutter out of your fragile working memory and onto paper.
Right.
You utilize digital apps as a temporary scaffold, never as a permanent substitute for your own resilience. When the stress gets trapped physically, you don't yell at the car alarm, you use somatic movement to discharge it.
Love the car alarm analogy.
It works so well. And then you use the physiological side to manually override your heart rate in real time. And finally, you anchor the chaos of life with natural sunlight in the morning and a digital sunset at night.
It is a comprehensive, full-body approach to the mind. You are regaining agency over your own physiology.
But before we wrap up, there was one final concept from the Mental Zone article that we wanted to leave you with. It is a concept called metacognition.
Metacognition, at its core, is the ability to think about your own thinking. It is the practice of stepping back and observing your mind as an objective witness, rather than being swept away by every single thought.
And this brings us full circle to why mental hygiene matters in the first place. We aren't just cleaning up the mental mess to get back to a baseline of zero. We are clearing the space to actually thrive.
Exactly.
But it raises a deeply provocative question. If metacognition allows you to step back and objectively observe your own thoughts,
then who is the you doing the observing?
exactly. If you are not your thoughts, what are you?
That is the ultimate question. Once you clear the mental cache and sweep away the psychological plaque, you finally have the quiet space to discover what is actually underneath it all.
We will leave you to ponder that one. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you walk away with a toolkit you can actually use today. And before you move on to whatever is next, do us a favor. Take a deep physiological sigh right now.
2 inhales through the nose, a long exhale through the mouth.
And let it all go. We'll catch you on the next one.